Part 2, The Crumbling. Drop everything and come to his rescue. The art school I attended was known for offering subpar aid to its students. In my self-seeking ways, I decided this was not acceptable, and that if I was going to get into that much debt to obtain a degree, then I was going to be supported in the ways that I needed to be supported. So I landed myself a job within the administrative offices at the school. I started as a receptionist and quickly worked my way into the student services office, where I could make a difference, aka get what I needed. I worked in the office for 2 years before graduating and did successfully get all of my needs met. I cannot say that that was the experience for many other students who found their way through this institution. However, once I had weaseled my way into the good graces of the financial department, I became an ally for as many students as I could. Students began to contact me directly to inquire about their financial aid. I would walk my happy little ass over to the financial aid office and ask my questions. When the task in question was not handled as the student needed, I would just take it upon myself to hang out until it was processed. I told myself that as long as I was getting my needs met, then I may as well see who else I could help while I was there. Coworkers used to express in complete disbelief, "I can't believe you just waltz right in there," when I would walk into the dean's or other executives' offices. To which I would respond, "How else are you supposed to get anything done just waiting around for them to respond to you?" In hindsight, I probably didn't have the best boundaries for protocol and procedures, but hey, no one told me to stop, so I didn't. This experience significantly spearheaded my career in higher education. Now, before you go and get your panties in a bunch thinking, "Wait, Morgan, didn't you go on to use your degree that you worked so hard to achieve?" Deep breaths. Yes, I did. While still in Tucson, I began working for a very prestigious photography studio in town. The grounds were stunning. The studio was gorgeous. I had every tool and toy available at my disposal. But there's a problem. The renowned photographer who created this gem had passed away, and it was all now being run solely by his widow. My high school graduating class was the last year to have senior portraits done directly by him before he passed. He was a very special man. Knowing that his name carried much clout around town, I knew that I would work there anyways and allow his legacy to propel my photography career. I worked at the studio with his widow and another photographer, soaking up every ounce of experience that I could. Banking on the clout of his name around town, we were often invited to be the official photographers for high-end philanthropic events. We attended the schmanciest galas and rubbed elbows with all sorts of notable members of society. All very impressive if you're into that sort of thing. Shortly after I graduated, my boyfriend also completed his term of duty in the military and was ready to attend the trade school of his dreams. As a perfectly doting girlfriend, desperate to get out of my hometown, I packed my bags and we headed up north to the big city. Arriving in Phoenix, 100 miles out of my hometown, I found myself a job working at a photography studio in a department store. Holy moly, that was an experience. I quickly learned that I had more knowledge and experience than everyone else that I worked with and immediately set off to find ways to restructure how this place operated. To my surprise, one does not just waltz into a big box corporation and demand the conditions and procedures be augmented to meet one's needs. This should have been my first red flag, that this would become a toxic environment for me. However, I had gotten my way many times before, so I would not surrender that easily. Here's the thing about creative endeavors. Being told what to do and how to do it doesn't often fare well for the artist. Coming off my high-end experience in Tucson, I couldn't understand how people arriving for these services could be so awful. In those moments, I had no regard for the fact that the clientele that shopped at this particular store was the same clientele showing up in my studio. I was in a very different world here, and I did not enjoy it one bit. Determined to support my man, I forced myself to see it through. I would call my mom on my commute home every day to tell her about the wretched clients I had to entertain that day. These were full-on vent sessions, dripping with disdain. My gracious mother would just listen and console me every single day, day after day. She would remind me that this experience would open the door to the next thing and that this was all temporary. Soon, I was calling her on my commute to work as well. I would be so anxious before even leaving the house that I would be sweating by the time I got into my car. It felt like the intensity grew deeper and stronger within my chest throughout the drive. I felt like I could just burst into tears at any given moment. I didn't know what else to do, so I would call my mom. Mile after mile, she would do her best to listen to me vent. Still doing my best to drive safely, I would drive down the highway just bawling my eyes out. By the time I arrived at the studio, she would have to talk me off the ledge just so I could calm down enough to clean up the mascara streaming down my face. This should have been another red flag, but continuing to paint red flags green, I continued working at the studio for a few more months. I was so desperate to support my boyfriend because I felt that he had supported me through my senior thesis. And every day that I worked at the studio, I would completely bury my true feelings from him by the time I got home. I would sit in my parked car, staring at myself in the mirror, having to give myself a pep talk just to go inside. I would project any inquiry of my day back to him and his studies, making us dinner, keeping up the house, and desperately drinking to subside the nauseating aching inside my body. After an embarrassing explosion at my studio supervisor one day, I had to excuse myself and pace up and down the Tupperware aisle of the department store just to keep from crying. But with every turn of my heel, my blood would boil even more intensely. I didn't see any way out, and the fluorescent lights felt like they were closing in on me. I knew what I had to do. I marched myself back over to the photo studio, where my supervisor still looked stunned that I had even walked away. I walked right past her at the checkout counter and tinkered around cleaning up the studio until the remaining customers were gone. The second I heard their goodbyes, I waltzed right up to my supervisor and unloaded all my thoughts before she could even ask me if I was okay. I told her that I thought the procedures and bureaucracy at the company were a load of horseshit. I told her that I was incredibly miserable and that this job had ruined photography for me forever. I told her that I was going to finish out my schedule and then find a new job somewhere else because I couldn't bear one more moment in this minimum wage hellhole. She quite gracefully received my rant. "I'm really sorry to hear that you feel that way," she said. "None of your points are wrong. This place really sucks. But I was going to talk to you about you becoming a manager so I could train you to replace me." Completely not surprised that this would be the response to convince me to stay, I said, "You're smart for getting out. There aren't enough zeros to make me take your job. Sorry." And just then, my next session arrived, and I instantly turned my freak-out rage off and my bubbly ray of sunshine personality back on. That was the last time I ever returned to that studio. My supervisor covered the rest of my shifts and told me I didn't have to finish out my 2 weeks. After some time of alcohol-induced fuzziness, I finally found myself back in higher education. It was not at a university, but at one of those trade schools that you hear about on TV. You know, the ones that promise you a better life, transferable credits, and a solution to all your problems, but never actually deliver. So desperate to never go back to a soul-sucking photography studio, I was able to get my foot in the door of the admissions department for an entry-level opening. I didn't even care what the job was, as long as it wasn't a photography studio. As I do with all things, I dove headfirst into my new job. First on my mind was to establish myself as a high-performing leader on my team. Next was to befriend all of the cutest and coolest members of the team to establish new drinking buddies. Third was to insert my foot into every possible opportunity that was available for me to climb the corporate ladder, even some that on paper weren't even available to me. It's funny how much self-seeking and ambition resemble each other. Within the organization, I completed leadership training certifications, leader as a coach certification, overcoming obstacles, and negotiation certifications. You name it, I completed it and excelled. I became so deeply involved within the company advancement programs that they started inviting me to help develop and assist in future training programs. Over the next 3 years, I was promoted multiple times, scaled across departments, and found myself in a very prestigious position within student services, specializing in student retention. The secret to my success? I had such a disdain for the beast that was this type of business that I made it my mission to make damn sure that by the time a student got to me in student services, after already signing their life away to admissions, I would get them to graduation. I excelled in this position because I was able to connect with my students in a way that most other advisors didn't seem to do. I got to know them. I listened to their stories and I dug for the truth about why they were there. Why had they made the deal with the devil in order to better their lives? My students opened up to me and they trusted me. I was often asked by the higher-ups within the company why my phone calls with my students were so much longer than those of most of the departments. I explained that I wasn't going to hang up the phone until we had solved the problem at hand, or my students had come off the ledge while previously ready to give up on their dreams. Simply put, I was committed to my students, and I wasn't willing to hang up the phone with them just to meet the corporate metrics. Providing my students with a true ally and support system when most of them had nothing and no one was my way of sticking it to the man. It was my way of rebelling against the corporate requirements dictated by stockholders who only viewed these brave humans as a number in their analytics. It was disgusting to me, and I stuck by my students to my core. In hindsight, what I was doing was making the institution a lot more money and financial support by increasing the graduation rate of the school. Either way, my students always came before corporate bureaucracy. And to this day, that is a core value of mine that has not changed. I will always show up to support my people, no matter the hot water they may find themselves in. I poured my heart and soul into this work, giving it far more than my salary provided in return. It filled my cup while I had no idea that my world was falling apart. On what started as a normal day in March 2013, I received a phone call from my mother. I was unable to understand her with the surrounding noise coming from the call center floor, so I walked outside to take her call. This time, my mom was the one bawling. Through her sobs, she explained to me that my dad was in the hospital and that I needed to get home immediately. I went back into the office, grabbed my supervisor, and headed into the HR office without a word. I sat them down and told them that I needed both of them to authorize my paperwork for an FMLA leave and that I needed to go at once, and they did. I was granted a 30-day paid leave of absence, grabbed my belongings, and walked out of the building, knowing deep in my core that I would not be returning. My roommates couldn't understand what was happening when they returned home to find me packing. As it would turn out, I wouldn't return there either. It damn near broke my best friendship. She felt completely and unexpectedly abandoned, and I could not even explain my decisions. Everything was changing before I could even comprehend what was happening. I got in my car and drove to Tucson. My dad was the strongest person I knew. He was healthy, worked hard, rode his bicycle 30 to 40 miles a day. He was a perfect bill of health. Arriving in Tucson, I learned that my dad had just had a heart attack. My brain could not comprehend how this could happen. He was a perfect bill of health. With my dad now being operated on, having a stent put in his heart, and my mom a mess, I immediately went into my role of the household. Lock it up and hold it all together. I sent my mom and brother home to get some rest and stayed the night with my dad in the hospital. With no concern about my physical state, I slept by the foot of his bed in a hospital chair. Finally feeling assured that he was in the best care, I was finally able to drift off to sleep. In the middle of the night, I was jolted awake by the sound of sirens and alarms. The monitors connected to my dad were going bananas. His vitals were dropping. I sat helplessly as the single nurse on the floor came running in and immediately went for the incision in his groin and started what looked like CPR on his leg. A constant pitch I can never unhear was ringing in the air. My dad was flatlining right before my very eyes. The nurse put every ounce of their weight into my dad's leg. They damn near beat the blood clot into dissolving as I sat helplessly in my chair, holding my breath. After watching his body turn completely colorless, the machines began to chirp again. I exhaled in relief. As vitals slowly began to display on the machines again, the nurse stepped back from my dad. He was ghost white, a sight I have yet to unsee. This woman single-handedly saved my dad's life, right before my eyes. I wept silently. Still trying to catch my breath, I knew deep within my core I was not returning to my old life. I was needed here. My dad would not go back to work for over a year, and it was my responsibility to keep the family restaurant afloat. I dropped everything I was doing and stepped into my new duties. My good girl training taught me that this was the right thing to do. Abandon everything you thought was best for you and be of service to your family when they need you. Period. Hard stop. I was needed. I was important. I created the much-needed stability. I was the glue. So I stayed.